My fiancé announced, "I'm not signing a prenup. You either trust me or it's over." I said, "You're right." Then I canceled the wedding that night. 2 days later, she was on social media begging me back. I, 32M, thought I knew everything about my fiancé until 3 weeks before our wedding. That's when the mask finally slipped. We'd been together for 4 years, engaged for 8 months. Everything seemed perfect on the surface. She was beautiful, charming, came from a good family. My parents loved her. My friends thought I was lucky. Hell, I thought I was lucky too. The first red flag should have been how quickly she wanted to move in together after just 6 months of dating. She claimed her lease was up and needed somewhere to stay temporarily. That temporary arrangement lasted 3.5 years. The second red flag was how she gradually stopped working full-time, claiming she needed to focus on her art and our relationship. By year 2, I was paying for everything while she sold maybe 3 paintings a year. But love makes you stupid, doesn't it? The prenup conversation came up during dinner at our favorite restaurant. I'd been putting it off, knowing it would be uncomfortable, but my lawyer insisted we needed to handle it before the wedding. My construction company had grown significantly over the past 5 years, and I'd recently inherited my grandfather's rental properties. I wasn't wealthy by most standards, but I had assets worth protecting. I brought it up gently, explaining that it was just a precaution, something my lawyer recommended for anyone with business interests. Her reaction was immediate and explosive. She accused me of not trusting her, of planning for our marriage to fail before it even began. Other diners started staring as her voice rose. She told me that if I really loved her, I wouldn't need a piece of paper to protect myself from her. She said that suggesting a prenup was essentially calling her a gold digger. The conversation ended with her storming out of the restaurant, leaving me to pay the bill and drive home alone. For the next 2 weeks, she gave me the silent treatment whenever I brought up the prenup. She'd change the subject, start crying, or pick fights about unrelated things. I started to feel like the villain in our relationship, questioning whether I was being unreasonable. Then came that final conversation, 3 weeks before our wedding date. She walked into my home office where I was reviewing contracts and sat down across from my desk with this determined expression I'd never seen before. She announced that she wasn't signing a prenup, period. She said I either trusted her completely or it was over. There was no middle ground, no room for discussion. I looked at her sitting there, arms crossed, chin raised defiantly, and something clicked. This wasn't about trust. This was about control. She was betting that I was too invested, too close to the wedding, too afraid of the embarrassment and lost deposits to call her bluff. I told her she was absolutely right. The confusion that flashed across her face was almost comical. She asked what I meant, and I explained that she was right. If I needed a prenup, then I obviously didn't trust her enough to marry her. And if I didn't trust her enough to marry her, then we shouldn't get married. She backpedaled immediately, saying that's not what she meant, that we could work something out. But I was already pulling out my phone, calling the wedding venue. As I spoke to the event coordinator about canceling, she sat there in stunned silence. That night, while she was out with her sister, I packed her belongings. For years of shared life condensed into boxes and suitcases, I arranged for a moving company to pick everything up the next morning and take it to her sister's place. When she came home to find her stuff packed, she broke down completely. She begged me to reconsider, promised she'd sign whatever I wanted, said she was just scared about the marriage, and reacted poorly. But something had fundamentally shifted in my mind. I'd seen behind the curtain, and I couldn't unsee it. I told her calmly that I was done, that I'd rather be alone than with someone who saw me as a meal ticket. She spent the night at her sister's, texting me constantly, calling until I blocked her number. The next morning, I began the process of canceling everything. The venue, the caterer, the photographer, the band, the florist. Some vendors kept deposits, but I didn't care. The money felt like a small price to pay for clarity. My best man handled calling the groomsmen, while I dealt with the harder task of calling family members. My parents were shocked, but supportive once I explained the situation. Her parents called me repeatedly, trying to mediate, but I'd made my decision. What I didn't expect was the social media campaign that started 2 days later. She posted a long, emotional message on Facebook about how devastated she was, how she'd made a mistake, but couldn't understand why I wouldn't fight for our love. She painted herself as a heartbroken woman whose fiancé abandoned her over a silly piece of paper. The post got hundreds of comments from friends and family, most supporting her, some questioning my character. Then came the Instagram stories. Photos of our happy moments together with captions about lost love and second chances. She posted pictures of the wedding dress she'd bought, talking about dreams that would never come true. The Twitter posts were the worst. She created a whole thread about how men in their 30s are so damaged by past relationships that they can't trust genuine love when they find it. She never mentioned my name, but mutual friends knew exactly who she was talking about. Friends started reaching out, telling me I should reconsider, that she was clearly devastated and had learned her lesson. My own sister called me heartless. Even my mother suggested I might be throwing away something good over stubbornness. But I held firm, because in those quiet moments, when the social media drama died down and I was alone in my house, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Update 1. 3 weeks after the canceled wedding, she escalated her campaign. She started showing up at places she knew I'd be. The gym where I worked out. The coffee shop near my office. The bar where my friends and I watched football on Sundays. Each encounter followed the same pattern. She'd approach looking perfectly put together, eyes slightly red as if she'd been crying. She'd ask if we could talk, just for a few minutes. When I declined, she'd get emotional in front of whatever audience was present. At the gym, she broke down crying in the middle of the weight room, loud enough for everyone to hear her pleading with me to give her another chance. At the coffee shop, she created such a scene that the manager had to ask her to leave. At the bar, she interrupted my conversation with friends to deliver a speech about how she'd been wrong and would do anything to fix things. My friends were divided. Half thought I should give her another chance since she was clearly sorry. The other half started questioning what they'd seen in our relationship that I'd missed. That's when my buddy Mike told me something that changed everything. Mike had been at our engagement party 8 months earlier. He'd overheard her talking to her sister in the kitchen while everyone else was in the living room celebrating. She'd been complaining about how long it was taking me to propose and how she'd had to drop hints for months. But that wasn't the worst part. Her sister had jokingly asked if she was sure she wanted to marry me or if she just wanted to marry my bank account. Mike said she'd laughed and responded that she'd figure out her feelings after she was financially secure. I asked Mike why he'd never told me this before. He admitted he'd thought about it, but wasn't sure if he'd heard correctly, and he didn't want to ruin my happiness based on a conversation he might have misunderstood. Now it all made sense. The timeline fit perfectly with when she'd started pushing for us to move in together, when she'd reduced her work hours, when she'd begun talking about marriage constantly. I realized I needed to be more proactive about protecting myself. Update 2. I hired a private investigator. Not because I wanted revenge, but because her behavior was becoming concerning and I needed to understand what I was dealing with. What he uncovered was worse than I'd imagined. She'd done this before. Not exactly the same situation, but a similar pattern with her previous long-term boyfriend. They'd been together for 3 years, lived together for 2. She'd gradually become financially dependent on him as well. When he tried to break up with her, she'd launched a similar social media campaign, showed up at his workplace, and made his life miserable for months until he'd moved to another city. The investigator also discovered she'd been lying about her art career. Those few paintings she'd supposedly sold, they were gifts to family members who'd given her cash to make me think she was contributing financially. She hadn't sold a single piece to a stranger in over 2 years. But the most damning discovery was her recent activity. She'd been researching my business online, looking up property records for my rental units, even driving by some of them taking photos. She'd also been in contact with a divorce attorney, which made no sense since we weren't married yet, unless she was planning ahead. Armed with this information, I made a decision that would change everything. I decided to give her what she wanted, a meeting. I texted her from a new number, asking if she wanted to talk. She responded within minutes, eager to meet. I suggested a coffee shop in the next town over, somewhere neutral where we wouldn't run into anyone we knew. She arrived early, dressed carefully in an outfit I'd always complimented her on. Her makeup was perfect, her hair styled the way I'd always liked it. She'd clearly put a lot of thought into this meeting. I let her talk first. She apologized for everything, the prenup fight, the social media posts, showing up everywhere. She admitted she'd been scared about marriage and had reacted poorly when I'd brought up the prenup. She promised things would be different if I gave her another chance. I listened patiently, nodding at appropriate moments, letting her believe she was winning me over. Then I told her I'd done some thinking and realized she was right about trust in a relationship. I said I wanted to try again, but I needed to be honest with her about something first. The relief on her face was obvious as I explained that I'd been investigating our relationship because her behavior had concerned me. I told her I knew about her previous boyfriend, about the lies regarding her art sales, about her research into my properties. Her expression shifted from relief to confusion to panic as I laid out everything I'd discovered. Then I delivered the final blow. I told her that I was recording our conversation and had documented evidence of her stalking behavior over the past few weeks. I explained that I'd spoken with a lawyer about harassment charges and had been advised that I had grounds for a restraining order. I gave her a choice. She could disappear from my life completely, delete all the social media posts about our relationship, and never contact me or show up where I might be again. Or I could pursue legal action that would make her behavior a matter of public record. The mask finally came off completely. The sweet, heartbroken fiancée disappeared, replaced by someone I barely recognized. She called me every name in the book, accused me of leading her on just to humiliate her, threatened to destroy my reputation and my business. I let her rage for a few minutes, recording every word, then calmly reminded her of the choice I'd given her. She chose to disappear. Update 3. 6 months later, my life had returned to normal. Better than normal, actually. She'd kept her word about staying away, probably because she realized I wasn't bluffing about the legal consequences. All the social media posts about our relationship had been deleted. Mutual friends stopped asking me about giving her another chance. I'd thrown myself into work and had landed the biggest contract in my company's history. The rental properties were doing well, and I'd even purchased another small apartment building. Financially, I was in the best position I'd ever been in. More importantly, I'd learned to trust my instincts again. I'd started dating someone new, a teacher I'd met through my sister. She was different in every way that mattered. She had her own career, her own goals, her own money. When I'd mentioned, early in our relationship, that I'd been engaged before and it hadn't worked out because of disagreements about a prenup, she'd surprised me by saying she thought prenups were smart and would want one herself. That conversation had happened over dinner, and she hadn't stormed out or given me the silent treatment. Instead, we'd talked about financial goals, career aspirations, and what we both wanted from a serious relationship. It was refreshing to be with someone who saw partnership as two whole people choosing to build something together, rather than one person looking for someone else to take care of them. 3 months into dating her, I realized what had been missing from my previous relationship: genuine compatibility and shared values. My ex had been performing the role of a loving partner while strategically positioning herself for financial security. My new girlfriend was actually being herself, which made it easy for me to be myself too. I never heard from my ex directly again, but through the grapevine, I learned she'd moved back in with her parents and was working full-time for the first time in years. Apparently, she'd tried the same approach with another guy she'd met online, but he'd seen through her act much faster than I had. Looking back, I realized the prenup had never been the real issue. It was just the moment when our fundamental incompatibility became impossible to ignore. She'd wanted a provider, and I'd wanted a partner. Those are two completely different things, and no amount of love or compromise could have bridged that gap. The best decision I ever made was calling her bluff when she gave me that ultimatum. She'd been betting that I was too invested to walk away, that I'd choose the path of least resistance and give her what she wanted. Instead, I chose self-respect. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is refuse to be with someone who sees you as an opportunity rather than a person. The temporary pain of ending an engagement was nothing compared to the lifelong misery I would have endured in a marriage built on deception. I kept the ring, not for sentimental reasons, but as a reminder. A reminder that when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. A reminder that ultimatums in relationships are usually manipulation tactics. And most importantly, a reminder that walking away from the wrong person is the first step toward finding the right one. The wedding would have been this weekend. Instead, I'm planning a weekend getaway with someone who loves me for who I am, not what I can provide. That feels like the real victory.